Ambassador Thexriel had done this many times before. In his 300 years of service to the Dominion, he had welcomed 47 new species into the galactic order. The process was always the same: show them power, show them death, show them what happens to those who resist. Watch them tremble. Welcome them to their place at the bottom. It was simple. It was effective. It had worked for 10,000 years. His flagship, the Eternal Dread, dropped out of hyperspace above the blue and green world the natives called Earth. Behind him came 47 warships, each one capable of burning a continent to ash. The humans had only just discovered faster-than-light travel. Their tiny fleet of explorer vessels looked like toys compared to his armada. Thexriel allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. This would be easy. The human delegation came aboard his ship 3 hours later. There were 5 of them, dressed in simple gray uniforms. Their leader was a woman with silver hair and lines on her face that spoke of age and experience. She introduced herself as Commander Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Government. Thexriel towered over her. His species, the Vorthani, stood nearly 3 meters tall. Their scales were black as void, their eyes burned red, and their claws could tear through metal. He had been chosen for this work because his appearance alone made most species surrender. Vasquez looked up at him and smiled. "Thank you for meeting with us," she said. "Your ships are very impressive." Thexriel felt his first moment of confusion. She should be afraid. Why was she not afraid? He pushed the thought away and began the presentation. The great screen behind him lit up with images of Dominion power. Star systems burned. Species knelt in submission. The Vorthani fleet moved through space like a swarm of metal locusts, leaving nothing but obedience in its wake. "The Dominion rules 4,000 species across 2 million star systems," Thexriel said. His voice was deep and carried the weight of authority. "We have existed for 10,000 years. In that time, we have destroyed 112 species who refused to submit. Their worlds are now empty. Their names are forgotten. This is the fate of those who resist." He paused for effect. The humans watched the screen with interest. "But those who join us willingly are given protection," Thexriel continued. "Safety. A place in the great order of things. All you must do is accept your position. Serve the Dominion. Know your place." He stopped the presentation and looked at the humans. He waited for the fear to show on their faces. Vasquez nodded slowly. "I see," she said. "That's quite a history. Would you like some coffee? We brought some from Earth. It's quite good." Thexriel stared at her. "Did you not understand what I showed you?" "I understood perfectly," Vasquez said. "You have big ships and you've killed a lot of people. It's very impressive. But the journey here was long, and I think we'd all like something to drink before we continue." One of the younger humans was already opening a container and pouring dark liquid into small cups. The smell was strange but not unpleasant. Thexriel decided to try a different approach. He told them about the Skethrani, a species of hunters who killed for pleasure. He described how they would track prey across star systems, how they kept the skulls of their victims as trophies. The Skethrani were used by the Dominion as enforcers. No one wanted to anger them. A human officer raised his hand. "How big are they?" "They stand 4 meters tall and can run at 60 kilometers per hour. The officer nodded and turned to Vasquez. "Sounds like a grizzly bear mixed with a cheetah." "We've dealt with both," Vasquez agreed. Thexriel felt his confusion growing. He tried again. He told them about the void worms, living weapons that swam through space and consumed starships whole. He showed them footage of a worm attacking a rebel fleet, swallowing vessels like a fish eating insects. The young officer leaned forward with genuine interest. "What's their biology like? Are they silicon-based? How do they survive in vacuum?" "They are weapons," Thexriel said. "They exist to destroy." "Yes, but how do they eat? What's their energy source? Do they reproduce?" Vasquez put a hand on the officer's arm. "Lieutenant Park, let the ambassador finish." Thexriel finished. He had shown them everything. The weapons, the conquered worlds, the species that had been erased from existence. He had painted a picture of absolute power and total dominance. The humans sipped their coffee. Finally, Thexriel asked the question that burned in his mind. "Why are you not afraid?" Vasquez set down her cup. She looked at him with eyes that held no fear, no submission, nothing but calm consideration. "Ambassador," she said, "let me show you something." She activated her own display. Images appeared on the screen. Thexril saw a world covered in ice, humans wrapped in animal skins huddling around fires. He saw humans facing creatures with massive teeth and claws. He saw plagues that killed millions, wars that burned cities, disasters that should have ended their species. "This is our history," Vasquez said. "For 200,000 years, everything on our planet tried to kill us. The cold tried to freeze us. The heat tried to burn us. Animals tried to eat us. Diseases tried to wipe us out. We killed each other in numbers you would find hard to believe." The images continued. Humans climbing mountains so tall that the air itself became poison. Humans diving into dark waters filled with predators. Humans strapping themselves to rockets and flying into the void of space. "We learned something in those 200,000 years," Vasquez said. "Fear is useful. It tells you when something is dangerous. But fear is not our master. We feel it, we acknowledge it, and then we do what needs to be done anyway." She stood up and faced Thexril directly. She barely reached his chest, but somehow she did not seem small. "You have bigger ships than us. You have more weapons. You've conquered thousands of species. All of this is true." She paused. "But we've been afraid before, Ambassador. We've faced extinction before. We're still here. And we stopped letting fear make our decisions a very long time ago." Thexril returned to the Dominion Council 3 weeks later. He stood before the 12 High Counselors and delivered his report. "The humans are different," he said. "They are not pretending to be brave. They are not hiding their fear. They simply do not feel it the way other species do. I do not know how this is possible. I only know that it is true." The Council dismissed his concerns. Thexril was old, they said. Perhaps he was losing his edge. They would learn the truth soon enough. The Dominion gave humanity the worst jobs in the galaxy. This was tradition. New species started at the bottom. They were given the dangerous work, the deadly assignments, the tasks that no one else would touch. Most species complained. Many lost members to accidents and disasters. Eventually, they learned their place through suffering. The High Council expected humans to follow this pattern. They were wrong. Kethmora was an observer for the Silacine Collective, one of the middle-ranked species in the Dominion hierarchy. Her job was to watch the humans and report on their behavior. She had been doing this for 6 months, and she still could not understand what she was seeing. The shattered zones were regions of space filled with radiation from ancient wars. The energy there was so intense that it could kill most species within hours. Ships that entered rarely came back. The Dominion used these zones as garbage dumps and graveyards. Humans volunteered to work there. Kethmora watched as human salvage crews signed up for missions into the shattered zones. They wore special suits and flew specially shielded ships. When the radiation broke through their defenses, they rotated crews and brought in medical teams. When crew members died, other humans stepped forward to take their place. "Why do they do this?" Kethmora asked a human cultural liaison, named David Chen. "The pay cannot be worth their lives." Chen shrugged. "The pay is good. The work needs to be done. Someone has to do it. But they die. Sometimes. But they know the risks. They choose to go anyway." Kethmora could not understand this. Her species, the Silacine, had spent 3,000 years avoiding danger. They had survived in the Dominion by being useful, but invisible. The idea of choosing to face death was foreign to her. The burning worlds were planets covered in volcanoes and rivers of molten rock. The surface temperatures could melt most metals. No species had ever successfully colonized these worlds because no species wanted to try. Humans built research stations there. They designed buildings that could withstand the heat. They created cooling systems and protective barriers. When volcanoes erupted and destroyed their work, they rebuilt. Scientists fought for the chance to study these worlds. They considered it an honor to work in such extreme conditions. The predator reserves were wildlife sanctuaries for the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy, species that had been used as weapons, animals that could kill with a touch or a look, monsters that haunted the nightmares of 1,000 worlds. The reserves were meant to contain these creatures forever. Humans asked permission to study them. Research teams entered the reserves with cameras and scientific instruments. They observed the predators, took samples, and wrote detailed reports. Some teams were killed. Other teams volunteered to replace them. They talked about the creatures with excitement and curiosity rather than fear. Kethmora attended a human briefing for a mission to a predator reserve. The team leader, a woman named Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, stood before her crew and described what they would face. The Thessian stalkers can turn invisible and strike without warning, Okonkwo said. They've killed every research team that's tried to study them. Our job is to find out how they hunt and whether we can predict their attacks. A young researcher raised his hand. What's our survival estimate? About 60%, Okonkwo said. Okay. The researcher nodded. What equipment are we bringing? They discussed gear and methods for an hour. No one talked about fear. No one suggested canceling the mission. They simply prepared for what they would face and accepted the risks. Kethmora found Okonkwo after the meeting. How can you be so calm? She asked. You just told your team that 4 of them might die. Okonkwo looked at her with patient understanding. We've all lost people before. We've all faced death before. It's part of the work. If we let fear stop us, we'd never learn anything. But why? Why is learning worth dying for? Because knowledge matters. Because understanding the universe matters. Because someone has to be the first to face the unknown. Okonkwo smiled. And honestly, because it's exciting. There's nothing quite like standing in front of something that could kill you and choosing to study it instead of running away. Word spread through the Dominion's lower castes. The humans were different. They took the dangerous jobs without complaint. They faced death without breaking. They seemed to fear nothing at all. Species that had lived in terror for thousands of years began to ask questions. The Kelith were a small species, bred by the Dominion to serve as workers and servants. They had been taught from birth that they were weak, helpless, valuable only for their labor. They existed at the very bottom of the hierarchy. A group of Kelith workers approached a human engineering team on a space station. The humans were repairing a reactor that had been leaking radiation for months. No one else would touch it. How do you do it? A Kelith named Vren asked. How do you face such danger without fear? The human engineer, a man named Marcus Webb, wiped sweat from his forehead. Oh, we feel fear, he said. Everyone feels fear. But fear is just a feeling. It tells you something is dangerous. It doesn't have to control what you do. But the masters say we must be afraid. They say fear keeps us safe. Fear keeps you controlled. Webb said. There's a difference. Being careful keeps you safe. Making good decisions keeps you safe. Fear just makes you easier to manage. Vren thought about this for a long time. He shared the conversation with other Kelith. They shared it with others. The idea spread like fire through dry grass. The High Council began receiving reports of unusual behavior among the lower castes. Species were asking questions they had never asked before. Workers were hesitating before following orders. Some were even requesting transfers to work alongside humans. Counselor Metherex read the reports with growing concern. What are the humans doing to them? He asked. Nothing deliberate, an intelligence officer replied. They're simply being themselves. And others are watching. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Dominion faced something it had never encountered. Not rebellion, not resistance, something far more dangerous. Hope. The High Council met in secret to discuss the human problem. 12 beings sat around a table of black stone, representing the 12 most powerful species in the Dominion. They had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years through one simple method. Fear. Every species feared something, and the Dominion controlled what they feared. But humans did not fit this pattern. They could not be frightened into submission. They worked the dangerous jobs without complaint. Worse, their attitude was spreading to other species. We must break them, Counselor Metherex said. He was Vorthani, like Ambassador Thexril, but older and more powerful. They must learn what it means to be afraid. How? Asked Counselor Silith of the Morvani. We have shown them our weapons. We have shown them our conquests. Nothing works. Then we will give them something they cannot ignore. Something that will teach them true fear. The void worms were the most terrible weapons the Dominion possessed. They were living creatures, each one the size of a small moon. They swam through space like fish through water, and they ate starships the way a whale eats tiny sea creatures. They had been created long ago through forbidden science, and they had been used to destroy entire civilizations. The Dominion kept 12 worms in controlled space, sleeping until needed. Metherex ordered all 12 released into human territory. The official story was an accident, a containment failure, a terrible tragedy. The council expressed their deepest sympathy and offered to evacuate human civilians. In truth, they wanted to watch humans learn to fear. The first attacks came without warning. The colony ship Horizon was carrying 3,000 settlers to a new world when a void worm appeared from nowhere and swallowed it whole. Research station Artemis was consumed an hour later. By the end of the first day, 5,000 humans were dead. Kethmora watched the news feeds from her ship, expecting to see panic. She expected to see humans begging for help, fleeing their space, finally showing the fear that all species showed when facing the worms. Instead, she saw anger. Elena Vasquez, now promoted to admiral, addressed the human fleet. Her face was hard and her voice was cold. "We have lost good people," she said. "We will lose more before this is over. But we will not run. We will not beg. We will hunt these creatures down and we will kill every single one of them." The human fleet mobilized within hours. Scientists who had been studying the predator reserves were pulled in to analyze worm biology. Engineers began designing new weapons. Pilots volunteered for what they called whaling expeditions. Kethmora watched a human planning session. Officers argued about tactics and strategies. They debated the best way to attract a worm's attention, how to damage its hide, where its weak points might be. They talked about the creatures the way hunters talked about prey. "You're going to attack them?" Kethmora asked in disbelief. "Void worms have destroyed entire fleets. They've eaten civilizations." A young pilot named Jackson turned to her with a grin. "Then nobody's managed to kill one yet, have they? We get to be first." The first hunt lasted 3 days. A squadron of human ships located a worm near an asteroid belt and engaged it. The creature destroyed 4 ships in the first hour. The remaining pilots regrouped, analyzed what they had learned, and attacked again. The worm destroyed 2 more ships. The humans kept coming. On the 3rd day, a pilot named Lieutenant Chen flew her damaged ship directly into the worm's mouth and detonated her reactor. The explosion tore through the creature's internal organs. It died thrashing and screaming in the silence of space. Humanity had killed its first void worm. Counselor Mithrex watched the footage in his private chambers. He saw the human ships attacking again and again, being destroyed, returning for more. He saw pilots dying with their weapons firing, refusing to retreat even when survival was impossible. He felt something he had not felt in 1,000 years. He was not sure what to call it. The humans learned from every battle. They discovered that worms were attracted to certain energy signatures. They found weak points in the creature's armor. They developed weapons specifically designed to hurt them. The hunts became more successful. Humans died, but so did worms. 4 months after the first attack, only 3 worms remained. Human hunting parties competed for the honor of killing them. Pilots who had lost friends to the creatures volunteered first. The last worm was killed by a team led by Admiral Vasquez herself. She fired the final shot that brought it down. When it was over, she sent a message to the High Council. "Thank you for the challenge," she said. "We were getting bored, but that was not the worst part. The worst part was what the humans did next. They captured a juvenile worm, a small one, only the size of a large ship. They contained it in a specially designed facility and began studying it. "We're thinking about domestication," a human scientist explained to a horrified Dominion observer. "If we can figure out how they think, maybe we can train them." Imagine having a void worm on our side. The High Council met again. This time, there was no talk of breaking the humans. There was only silence and the growing understanding that they had made a terrible mistake. "What are they?" Counselor Sileth asked. "What kind of species responds to ultimate terror by becoming the predator?" Mithrex had no answer. He had sent the worms to teach humans fear. Instead, humans had taught the worms to fear them. For the first time in his long life, Mithrex wondered if the Dominion had finally met something it could not control. "They taught us we didn't have to be afraid." The story of the void worm hunts spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Every species heard how the humans had faced the most terrible weapons in existence and won. Not through superior technology, not through greater numbers. Through sheer refusal to be afraid. Kethmora found herself changed by what she had witnessed. She had spent her entire life being careful, being quiet, being afraid. Her species had survived in the Dominion by never drawing attention to themselves, but watching humans face death with determination instead of terror had planted a seed in her mind. She began meeting with others who felt the same way. They gathered on remote stations, in cargo bays, in the spaces between shifts where no one would notice. There were Kelith workers who had talked to human engineers. There were Morvith scientists who had worked alongside human researchers. There were members of a dozen species, all carrying the same question in their hearts. What if we stopped being afraid? A Kelith, named Vren, became one of Keth Mora's closest allies. He had changed since his first conversation with the human engineer Marcus Webb. He stood straighter now. He asked questions that workers were not supposed to ask. He had begun teaching others what he had learned. Fear is a feeling. Vren told a secret gathering of Kelith workers. It tells you something is dangerous, but it does not have to control what you do. The humans taught me this. But the masters will punish us, a young Kelith said. They will hurt us. They will kill us. They might, Vren agreed. But they are already hurting us. They are already killing us, slowly, through work and neglect and despair. The only question is whether we die on our feet or on our knees. Human advisors began appearing at these meetings. They did not come as leaders or commanders. They came as teachers. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, the researcher who had studied the predator reserves, spoke to a group of Morvith scientists. Courage is not the absence of fear, she told them. Courage is feeling afraid and acting anyway. Every human who has ever done anything brave was scared. We just learned not to let fear make our decisions. Marcus Webb taught engineering crews how to organize and support each other. The Dominion keeps you separate because united workers are strong workers. They keep you afraid because afraid workers don't ask questions. But you're not alone. You have each other. And you have us. Admiral Vasquez herself visited the growing resistance movement. She met with leaders from a dozen species in a hidden station on the edge of Dominion space. We can't fight your battles for you, she told them. This has to be your choice, your movement, your future. But we can teach you what we know. We can show you that the Dominion is not as powerful as it wants you to believe. A Threxian warrior named Gorth spoke up. His species had been conquered 5,000 years ago. They had been soldiers for the Dominion ever since, fighting and dying for masters they hated. How? Gorth asked. How do we stop being afraid? Your species was born this way. We were not. Vasquez shook her head. We weren't born this way. We learned. It took us 200,000 years, but we learned. And you can learn too. She told them about human history. She told them about slaves who had won their freedom. She told them about small groups who had stood against empires. She told them about people who had faced death rather than submit to tyranny. Fear is a prison, Vasquez said. But the door was never locked. You just have to choose to walk out. The first real uprising happened on the mining world of Kelos 7. Threxian workers had been digging precious metals for the Dominion for generations. They lived in terrible conditions, worked until they dropped, and were replaced without thought when they died. Gorth led the revolt. He had trained with human military advisors. He had learned tactics and strategy. But more importantly, he had learned to believe in himself and his people. The Dominion sent enforcers to crush the rebellion. The Skethrani hunters came, expecting easy prey. They found something very different. The Threxians fought back. They used the mining equipment as weapons. They collapsed tunnels on enemy positions. They refused to retreat, refused to surrender, refused to be afraid. When the Skethrani commander demanded their submission, Gorth answered with words he had learned from humans. We would rather die free than live as slaves. The battle lasted 3 weeks. The Threxians took heavy losses, but they held. News of their resistance spread across the Dominion. Other species watched and wondered. If the Threxians could fight back, maybe they could too. Keth Mora coordinated communications between resistance groups. She had never thought of herself as brave, but she found strength she had not known she possessed. Every time fear threatened to overwhelm her, she remembered the humans. They felt fear too. They just did not let it stop them. The Silacine revolted 2 months after Kelos 7, then the Kelith, then the Morvith. Uprising after uprising spread across Dominion space. Not all of them succeeded. Many were crushed. Many people died. But the fear was broken. Species that had cowered for millennia were standing up. They were fighting back. They were dying, yes, but they were dying with dignity and purpose rather than quiet desperation. The High Council tried everything. They sent fleets. They made threats. They offered rewards for the capture of resistance leaders. Nothing worked. Fear had been their only real weapon. and fear no longer worked. Councillor Mithrex stood before the council as reports of another uprising came in. His hands shook as he read the numbers. Half the Dominion's labor force was in revolt. A quarter of their territory was in open rebellion. The humans, Councillor Sileth said. This is their doing. No, Mithrex replied quietly. This is our doing. We built an empire on fear. We never considered what would happen if someone taught our subjects not to be afraid. He looked at the map of the galaxy, now marked with the symbols of rebellion. 10,000 years of dominance were crumbling before his eyes, and somewhere out there, humans were watching and smiling. Fear never touched them, and now it doesn't touch us. The Dominion did not fall in a great war. It did not collapse in fire and blood. It simply became irrelevant. Species stopped obeying. Workers walked away from their posts. Soldiers refused to fight against their own people. The great fleets that had terrified the galaxy for 10,000 years sat idle because no one would crew them. The hierarchy that had kept everything in place depended on one thing: fear. When fear stopped working, the hierarchy collapsed. There was nothing underneath it but empty threats and old habits. Councillor Mithrex watched it happen from his chambers on the Dominion capital world. He was the last of the original council. The others had fled or been overthrown by their own species. Only he remained. Surrounded by guards who no longer believed in their duty, he sent a request for a meeting with Admiral Elena Vasquez. He needed to understand. After everything that had happened, he needed to know how this was possible. Vasquez came alone. She walked through the empty halls of the Dominion Palace without guards or weapons. She was older now, her hair completely white, her face lined with years of war and politics, but her eyes were the same as they had been at first contact. Calm, confident, unafraid. Mithrex received her in his private study. The room was filled with treasures from conquered worlds, trophies of Dominion power. They seemed meaningless now. "Admiral," he said, "thank you for coming." "Counselor." She sat across from him without ceremony. "You wanted to talk." Mithrex was silent for a long moment. He had prepared speeches, arguments, demands. Now they all seemed pointless. "How?" he finally asked. "How are you not afraid? You are mortal. You are fragile. Your lifespans are pathetically short compared to mine. You should be afraid. Every species is afraid. Fear is the universal constant." Vasquez considered the question. She seemed to be thinking about how to explain something that was obvious to her but invisible to him. "We are afraid of many things," she said. "We're afraid of failure. We're afraid of losing the people we love. We're afraid of being forgotten after we die. We're afraid of not living up to our potential." Mithrex leaned forward. "Then why? Why did none of my threats work? Why did the void worms not break you? Why did nothing I did make you submit?" "Because fear of death is different from fear of living badly." Vasquez smiled slightly. "We learned to master that fear a long time ago. We had to. Our planet was trying to kill us from the day we evolved. Everything wanted to eat us, freeze us, burn us, drown us, and we survived. We're still here." She gestured at the window, at the stars beyond. Every human carries 200,000 years of ancestors in their blood. Ancestors who faced predators with nothing but sticks and stones. Ancestors who crossed oceans in tiny boats. Ancestors who walked into the unknown because staying meant certain death. We are the children of people who refused to let fear control them. Mithrex shook his head. "But we had power, real power. We could have destroyed you." "Yes," Vasquez agreed. "You could have, but you didn't want to destroy us. You wanted to control us. And control requires fear. When we refused to be afraid, you had nothing." She stood and walked to the window. The city below was quiet. The great engines of Dominion power had stopped. "You made a mistake," she said. "You built your empire on the idea that all species fear the same things: death, pain, loss. You thought fear was universal because suffering is universal. But you missed something important." "What?" "Courage is universal too. Every species has it somewhere inside them. It just needs to be awakened. It needs to be taught." She turned back to face him. "You kept your subjects afraid for so long that they forgot they could be brave." "We reminded them." Mithrex sat in silence. He had lived for over 1,000 years. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had helped build the greatest power the galaxy had ever known, and now he was watching it crumble because of a simple idea. "What happens now?" he asked. Now we build something new, something better. Vasquez sat down again. The Dominion is over, but that doesn't mean chaos. The species you controlled are already forming new alliances, new governments. They're learning to live without fear for the first time in their history. And humanity? Will you rule in our place? Vasquez laughed. It was a genuine laugh, full of warmth. No, we have no interest in ruling anyone. We never did. We just wanted to explore, to learn, to see what was out there. She shook her head. We didn't plan any of this. We just refused to be afraid, and everything else followed from that. The new order was called the Accord. It was not an empire. It had no rulers, no hierarchy, no system of control. It was simply an agreement between species to help each other, to share knowledge, to face the universe together. Humans did not lead the Accord. No one did. Different species contributed different things. The Threxians provided strength and warrior spirit. The Silacine provided coordination and communication. The Kelith provided creativity and hard work. And humans provided something harder to define. They provided example. Keth Mora became one of the Accord's first ambassadors. She traveled between worlds, helping species that had been enemies learn to trust each other. She had spent her life being afraid, and now she spent her life helping others overcome their fear. At a ceremony marking the first anniversary of the Accord, she gave a speech that was broadcast across the galaxy. For 10,000 years, we lived under the Dominion, she said. We were told that fear was natural, that submission was survival, that we could never be anything more than slaves to those stronger than us. She paused and looked at the representatives of 100 species gathered before her. Then the humans came. They were not stronger than the Dominion. They were not more advanced. They had no secret weapon. They simply refused to be afraid, and in refusing, they showed us something we had forgotten. Her voice grew stronger. Fear is a feeling. It tells us something is dangerous, but it does not have to control us. We can acknowledge danger without being paralyzed by it. We can face death without surrendering to it. We can be afraid and still be brave. She smiled. The humans have a phrase. When someone faces something terrible and stands firm anyway, they say that person has courage. But now, across the Accord, we have a new phrase. When someone refuses to let fear control them, when they stand up despite the odds, when they choose hope over despair, we say something different. Keth Mora looked out at the assembled species, at the future they were building together. We say they have humanity in them. Somewhere in the crowd, Admiral Elena Vasquez wiped a tear from her eye. Beside her, Vren the Kelith stood straight and proud. Nearby, Gorth, the Threxian warrior, had his arm around a Silacine scientist. Species that had been enemies for millennia stood together as friends. The galaxy had changed. Fear no longer ruled. Hope had taken its place, and it had all started because humanity entered the Dominion, and fear never touched them.